Assuming, have everybody familiar at least with the term of permaculture? And, you know, I don't know how many articles you'd find online, probably thousands of people saying, what is permaculture, right? I mean, that question's been asked so many times that I'm sick of hearing it. So, what is permaculture? You know, anybody want to give a short and brief definition?
Well, now we're afraid of upsetting you.
Yeah.
Research. We're going to have to stay
Well, it's a combination of the two words, right? Permanent culture. Okay? It's often associated as a gardening technique, which I find to be, you know, an overused and simplistic way of thinking of permaculture. My background is in social ecology, and I've always been attracted to permaculture as a systems designed for governance and creating permanent communities, of which obviously food production is a portion of it. And I suppose the emphasis on growing food is because it's sort of one of the simplest first steps, right? You can grow some food on your balcony, or you can grow some food in your yard. You can do some edible landscaping, create a community garden, et cetera, et cetera. Those are really nice community building exercises. But the concept of permaculture goes far beyond. So that's what my presentation is about tonight, is sort of the principles and the ethics and behind and the ideas of what permaculture is all about. And from that, we could hopefully have a discussion about some ways of implementing the concept. Oh, I'm reading the wrong computer.
And you know what, I wonder if it will work.
Down at the very bottom there's that little slider.
here's slide
No,
show.
just to the left, there's a...
What's that?
Yeah, no, you're right, so click that.
Click that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not clicking.
All right.
There we go, no? Okay. Then
Down at the bottom, next to the slider, that little one that looks like a podium,
Oh, yeah.
that's present.
Okay,
There
cool.
you go.
All right, and maybe this week I can figure out how to use this thing. All right, so anyway, I put this on because this presentation, or one similar to it, is on my website, and I'll also send a copy to Jordan, so it could be on the page.
Yay!
But, good. So hopefully it won't keep advancing like it did last week. This is a common logo that you see with permaculture design. But again, it has its roots in growing food and agriculture, but it's all about ecological principles and design techniques for restoring ways of living. And I think the key point is that it benefits all life, not just human life, right? So the guiding ethics, you know, care of the land, care of people, reduce consumption, and share the surplus. Okay, so it's not just about local economy and, you know, bioregionalism in the sense of, you know, just being survivalists on our own. Okay, it's about taking care of ourselves so that we can help our neighbors as well by sharing the surplus. So there's several concepts or principles in permaculture. It was started by a guy named Bill Mollison in the late 70s in Tasmania, Australia. And he came, well actually it's probably before that, but he came to North America. Actually he came to a NOFA conference, Northern Organic Farmers Association. It was his first trip to North America. And he gave a presentation there at a conference that I helped organize for NOFA. And it really kind of started this whole trend. But he and David Holmgren wrote another book called The Designer's Manual, which is really not, it's not, if you ever see the book, it's a big, thick book. It's like as big as a dictionary. And it's not really meant to be read cover to cover. It's more as a resource manual like a dictionary would be. That you could look up things and ideas and principles of. But the introduction is an easy read book and a real good book. I believe this is still in print, probably in many new editions. And if you really wanted to get a good grasp of what permaculture is, this is still the best book on that. So The idea of relative location is a really good idea in terms of whole systems design and planning. Good example of that, and a really simplistic example, is that when you walk in my house in the back door, the first thing you walk by is the wood pile before you can get into the main part of the house, right? So that every time I walk into the house this time of the year, I grab a couple of sticks of wood to bring into the fire, right? So because I know as soon as I get in the house, I'm going to want to build a fire or put wood in the fire. So you don't have to make an extra trip, right? Whereas if the wood pile was at the other end of the house or back in the yard or something, then I'd have to come in, I'd take my coats off, I'd see what's going on, and then I'd realize, oh, I got to go back outside. Okay? So on a farm, you would like say, you might place the wood pile between the chicken house and your house, right? So that because you go to the chicken house, you go to the chicken barn at least twice a day, right? You'll go out there to feed them, open the door. You'll go out later in the morning to actually go out there 3 times a day, right? You'll go out there to collect the eggs, and then you'll go out there again to close the door and make sure they're ready for the night. And each time you do that, you could bring in a piece of wood, right? So that's the simplest concept of relative location. But we could do that in terms of urban planning too. Like, how else could we apply that principle of relative location?
I took my vegetable garden, used to be at the back behind my fruit trees, and when I got busy, I'd never get there. So I just tore out the whole border at the front all around my driveway, and now my vegetable garden is 12 feet wide, all the way around my driveway. So I park my car, and I pick up my salad, and I go in the house with it.
Yeah.
And, it's much more likely to get weeded, planted, harvested, and everything else when it's between my car and my front door.
Exactly. Certainly when they, in a city system, they would certainly, or at least I would hope they certainly think of relative location when they design bus routes, right? In terms of where people live, where most people work, and, shops along the way that the bus route would stop so that it's the most efficient way of planning the routes. Okay, so multiple functions for a single element. This I think is probably the most useful lesson I ever learned in permaculture, and that is basically don't ever do anything in life unless you've got 3 good reasons for doing it. And if you've got 3 good reasons for doing it, you're probably not going to regret having done it. Okay? Whether that's designing your house, or planning your day, or whatever it is. If you've thought it out really well, and you can say, yeah, I'm doing this because I got. Back in '95, my wife and I, we started the Institute for Bioregional Studies, and we hosted a permaculture design course at the Ovens in Nova Scotia with a guy named Michael Pilarski, who you should really look up on the internet. He's really an incredibly knowledgeable guy from Oregon. And Gary Lane, who teaches organic agriculture at Sir Sanford Fleming College. And we had Bill Rees as a guest speaker, and a couple of other people. And then in '96, we did it again at the Ark at Spry Point. My wife was the project leader that started the Ark with New Alchemy back in the early '70s. And at the time, the province was hoping to divest of the Ark, and we were trying to get it back. And some friends of ours who were also New Alchemy people had just gotten the Cape Cod Ark back, which was the first Ark, and turned it into this fabulous space, and it's a co-housing development and all this really cool stuff. And we thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that here too? Anyway, long story short, it didn't happen. But right after that design course, we hosted an Eco-Cities conference here at the university. And we had John Todd, who was the founder of New Alchemy. We had Bill Rees, who teaches bioregional mapping at Simon Fraser. Bill Rees came back for that. He's the guy that created Ecological Footprint. David Bell, who was a Dean of Environmental Studies at York. It was like just this great lineup. We had the lead architect for what was, at the time, the most eco-village in the States, which was Seaside, funded by Disney World, of all places, in Florida. And we must have had like And we had over 100 people at this conference, and we had one person from PEI. I don't even remember who the name of that person was. It was like really amazing. So like, somebody was talking about Gene was talking about all the new faces and whatnot. And so it's really encouraging to see, a whole lot of people getting involved with this. But what we did during that conference is we gave everybody like 15 minutes to give a short presentation about who they are, what their background is at the university. And then we broke up into groups, and we took different routes from the university down to the waterfront and back. And we said, okay, on your way down and on your way back, just as a group, talk about redesigning the city. And then we created what we call the Charlottetown Declaration, which we delivered to City Hall, and which I actually updated a couple of years ago and re-delivered it to City Hall with the same response, which was no response.
Have you tried Ramona?
No, that's a good idea. I should send it to
You
Ramona.
should send it to
Yeah,
Ramona,
that's a
because
good idea.
Ramona would, at
It's
the
a very
very
good idea.
least, read it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
She's awesome. She's the bright light at City Hall, as far as I'm concerned.
But if I don't know if you've ever, Adam Finich has certainly raised, I think, a lot of people's consciousness on the island about the impact that global warming or climate change will have on PEI. Can't remember who is that. Who is the deputy premier under Chrétien? Sheila Copps. I don't know if anybody ever saw the map that Sheila Copps had drawn of PEI, but it was turning it into an archipelago of islands because of climate change. So,
Sea level rise.
eh?
Sea level rise.
Yeah. So, we're a small island, but we're expected to be impacted the most heaviest by climate change. So it's not a matter of what we could do for the world, it's a matter of what we need to do to sustain ourselves here. So what do we think? What can we do?
Well, when you look at Charlottetown, I ran a climate model for a project last year too, and when you look at Charlottetown, all those underground rivers that you speak of, they're still all there. And all you need to do is raise the sea level just a tiny bit in order to have them all ripping right through neighborhoods all over town. It's quite shocking what happens to Charlottetown with just even a meter and a half.
Well, I swim to the co-op on a regular basis. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Adam's presentation, but he's talking about sea surges coming almost up to the university in a very short time. Like we're talking well within most of our lifetimes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's when you think of the map of Charlottetown, there's a diagonal band that goes right across, right up to the university. And the farm center's on it, that's why it's so low there, and those areas, low areas on Queen Street, and it just goes diagonally, like from Victoria Park right up to UPI, and that's gonna be a river, and it'll be full of surges.
So when you say diagonal, go ahead, Lizzie.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, I really like the idea when you're talking about, what if those streams and rivers were brought to the surface again? Now, of course, it does in some ways feel like a really lovely what if that I have no idea how we get there. But at the same time, I was thinking, I remember there being like walking tours when I lived in Toronto of there used to be a river here and this is what it used to look like. And I happen to know that just from having people in my house that, oh yeah, that's where the Valley Villages was a pond, right? It would be really neat to have walking tours of the city.
And you're talking about
Yeah, here.
consciously bringing those back, as
good.
opposed to climate change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Karen Lips could do that. She could do some mapping. I own a house on Escher Street, and somebody told me right after I bought it that Escher in German means river. When you're going down Escher toward Jogies Park, the houses on the left there, the ones further up this end of the street, they couldn't put a basement in because the water level was so high. And the house that I have there, every time it rains hard, if the water pump, if the sump pump doesn't come on, my furnace is ruined.
Yeah, and well, just walking to Holland College, the student parking lots are this way, And that whole park is flooded and
Yeah.
that street
Children's Park
there.
was like underwater there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I'm gonna say 5 times, just took off the shoes, rolled up the pants and walked barefoot through the deep water from the parking lot to the school. There's,
So we have this reality, and then the province pays to have a convention center built on the waterfront with underground parking.
I know, it's like,
With
well, in Europe, cities are building, they're preparing now, infrastructure, building dikes and things right now. Across, a whole bunch of cities are doing that. Here, we're building something on the waterfront, like, especially one that seems to not be very stable anyway.
I went to the Energy Ministers Conference 2 years ago, the
Oh, I was
Energy
there
Ministers
too.
were here.
I was
And,
outside.
my whole class was, yeah, you were outside, I was outside later, but I actually had a pass to go in. And, our class was supposed to go to the renewable energy meeting, and I thought, well, I probably already know that one. I'll just go to the oil and gas one. I got an escort, and I went to the oil and gas one with my escort. And the VP of Suncor stood right there at, 8.5 feet above sea level, and said, using unconventional extraction methods, we have enough natural gas to continue to burn it at our present rate of consumption for 200 years. And I thought, Jesus, buddy, I hope you can hold your breath. Because if we just continue along our merry way for 200 years, we won't have to worry much about the new convention center on the water.
Yeah.
Look, 8 feet above sea level, just like no,
One of the things is
Connection.
there's enough going on right now, so it doesn't really, like, you have to have stopping, you have to change, but there's enough already set in motion that there's
Right.
gonna be
Yes.
huge changes no matter what. So whatever mitigations, there has to be mitigation strategies. Charlottetown may be abandoned, if they don't do something drastic, because we just don't have the financial base to have huge financial save, we're not New York City, where we can put $3 billion for something around Charlottetown.
Just have the rich people on the condos on the waterfront, like, okay, go ahead, buy one, you guys.
I think they're gonna be bailed out by insurance and then, yeah.
So
Well, I
what
don't
do we do
Yes.
Yeah.
from the long term?
What were a few things in the declaration, the Charlottetown Declaration, I was wondering?
Well, one was not allowing waterfront
Development.
development without taking into consideration climate change, so that, if something's going to be built on the waterfront, it should be built on
Well,
stilts.
I mean, the whole Charlotte development, and privatization of the waterfront, I mean, one of the candidates for conservative leadership was Rob Lance, he was one of the people that was behind all that. Because all they did was privatize the waterfront completely, to a much larger extent.
I want to come back, so Jordan, right?
Yeah.
So Jordan's question of, so what do we do?
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
it's inevitable that there'll be low sink spots of water, rivers and stuff coming back up, waterways, in preparation, I guess, sell our house on the low spot. Yeah, start the food forest / permaculture growing, I guess.
Mhm.
That's
When
Start-
it comes to sea level rise, if you think about it, the water in Charlottetown comes through one small point, and that's out by Fort Amherst and Capet. One simple dike there for about $1.5 billion, and the Dutch are excellent at building them. You can put one across there, and you're gonna stop flooding in Charlottetown for probably 50 to 80 years.
You said 1.5 million?
Billion.
Billion, okay, I was.
That's why I was saying billions. I
Yeah.
just can't see,
Well, if you take
I know.
account to what the value of Charlottetown is and what's already put into our infrastructure, that dike can remain open, allow the cruise ships in and the whole bit. It's just that when it's gonna reach a certain point where it's gonna start damaging property, they can close the dike and hold it at a certain height in the Charlottetown harbor. And then after that, when it goes back down again, they can open it up again. So it will still allow trade to come in and out of Charlottetown harbor, but it will stop a storm surge and it will stop flooding after a while. Okay, to
Yeah,
build that.
that's a brilliant idea. But, you know, I hate it because it's like an excuse to keep doing what we're doing.
And not only that,
You
but
know,
it won't allow
but you're absolutely right,
rivers to
that probably is what's going to happen, you know?
The
Anyway,
problem
but
is it's
it's
not
still-
going to allow the water to flush, the
Yeah.
rivers to come out and do a complete flush of everything, because it's going to stop water movement. And that's going to be a major issue right there.
I don't think it
Has anyone ever
necess-
been to the Netherlands?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. I was in the Netherlands a couple of years ago, on a, well, I got invited to a consultation on sustainable community design, but then we also did a tour of the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, I realized that sustainable development had what I think at least was a different interpretation. I think it was sustaining development, because they are building dikes like you wouldn't believe. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, it's like part of their culture, right? It's like it's in their DNA. I was in a museum where I saw this wooden culvert from a dike that was over 2,000 years old. Oh my God, you know. I was on a farm that was over 4 meters below sea level.
But people used to work with nature, look at Acadians and Acadian dikes, even what they built, even in some settlements that were abandoned, probably early 1800s in PEI, you can still see the structures in place where they built them, which was keeping salt water off and marshlands that would be able to use. So people actually were able to adapt to the environment they were in and use it as an advantage, right, for growing food and other things. And all that technology is gone because rather than working with what's there, it's all much more artificial. You know, right? We're farming now in places where you should never farm.
Yeah.
But at one point, we used to work with the land to be able to get the best out of it, right? So that's when I'm thinking about permaculture. Part of Acadia dikes and the technology they had is could work very much with the same concept as permaculture, right? Because and where dikes were built and how they operated meant that they didn't need to clear off forests. They could use land that was next to the ocean, and it kept the saltwater intrusion out, whereas a freshwater was able to come in and help grow crops and things.
Actually, I think in a presentation of Adam Finch's, everybody knows Adam Finch's, right? Professor at UPEI. He was on the committee for climate change that won the Nobel Peace Prize. And at one of the presentations, one of his recommendations was hire a Dutch engineering firm.
Right.
Well, one of the things I saw in Holland, right near Rotterdam, they have these gates that are on either side of the river. And each gate has more steel in it than the Eiffel Tower. And it's water powered, that when a sea surge, when it occurs, the pressure of the water coming in will close these gates and prevent the water from coming up the river. And they tested it once, and they realized that they hadn't taken into consideration the backflow. So they had to build all these other canals to drain the water. But regardless, the thing works, and that's
Well,
it's a crazy technology to allow us to keep doing the same thing. Because what do we do 80 years from now when that dike isn't big enough, right?
I don't think it necessarily does allow us to continue what we're doing. I think it might just be a necessary part of mitigation. Like
Yeah.
they were talking about these methane bubbling that's happening in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean. How these used to be like a few meters wide, now they're a kilometer wide, and that positive feedback loop that we're already getting with climate change. That's something that might occur and continue to occur whether or not we stop using fossil fuels at our current rate. So that might be a necessary technology that we can use, that like engineers coming out of the new sustainable engineering department at UPEI. Like, I mean, when Tim Banks got out of school, poor example, when Tim Banks got out of school, like, he was offered a contract to design like the first like couple Sobeys, I think, and from that he started APM, which is like major development business on PEI. If the same thing happened for students coming out of the sustainable engineering department, then they could do the same thing. It would just be like a dike that we would need potentially in the future could start an engineering, a sustainable engineering industry on PEI, that we would need to make these kind of major infrastructure redevelopment projects that are necessary. I know this isn't something that like necessarily we can do, but like between us, but it's something that to think about in the long term.
Yeah, but in terms of Charlottetown, I think turning the waterfront into vegetation that can help absorb the water impact and the storm surges would be the smartest thing, and avoid the 50,000 per person. But I don't know if that's going to be done until we see a lot more of this surge. I think as soon as the damage starts really happening and people start losing their property, then I think anything is on the table. Yeah.
Should be planting willows to replace all those embers. Something to take out the big amount of water.
Guys,